From the halls of Austin to the fights in D.C. that hit us at home, this is Politics with the Big Dogs.
Hello. This is Anthony Holm, host of Politics with the Big Dogs. If you're just joining us for the first time, we have at least a year's worth of shows. After they run on the radio, they go up on all across the podcast platform. So that's iTunes, that's YouTube, it's Spotify. They're everywhere. You name it, we've had them on, from Ken Paxton to Don Buckingham to the comptroller, Don Huffines, now newly appointed comptroller, and obviously the November nominee. Also, Aaron Wrights, who ran for Attorney General, who recently got appointed to as a U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Texas. So it's some of the going after prosecuting some of the worst actors, gang, drug lords, and human traffickers around, and many, many more. Massive numbers of conservative leaders, thought leaders, judicial actors, you name it, we have it. So today we have a great show for you. Too much, as always, too much. Let's first take a moment and recognize that we had a tragic event. We had a Texas service member killed. She was targeted. She and two others were targeted by Iranian missiles. Iran bragged that they were aiming for the barracks, and we had a young lady from Carrollton killed. A family lost a child. We lost a soldier. She was there advancing our opportunity, our freedom, our liberties. We're going to speak to that, but let's all keep that top of mind. God bless her soul, and pray, and all the prayers and strength you can for her family and those healing around her loss. We are also going to speak about Texas finally has a Secretary of State. So what's that mean about closing our primaries? We heard President Trump address the nation recently, and he spoke about the foreign nation interference, Iran and China, in the 2020 elections, one of the closest in history, and what happened and why. We're going to speak at least in somewhat about what it means with the Chinese, what they're doing, how they're impacting not just our elections, but all of us, TikTok and otherwise, and their incredible software, what they're doing. Tallarico, this liberal crazy activist who is the Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate against Ken Paxton. Tallarico finally acknowledges that he has a problem with black voters in November. Yeah, go figure. They don't believe that there are 6 genders. They're not going to come out and vote for you. Inversely, Cornyn's still trying to help Tallarico. He's not campaigning for or endorsing Ken Paxton in any material way. Zero campaigning for, and in fact, as we talked about last week, intends to skip the national convention, the midterm national convention that President Trump and the RNC is organizing in Dallas. He thinks he has a scheduling issue. And of course, zero fundraising help. They go and spend $150 million against Paxton, implicitly helping Tallarico, and now they're just leaving him hanging. We have 2 Texas mayors in trouble, one indicted for felony voter fraud, and one being called on to resign. He may lose his office. We're going to go in depth into that. Abbott, who of course is fundraiser extraordinaire, I think he's raised $500 million or so over the course of his time in office. He started buying TV time for August. Now he's already spent millions of dollars against a hapless, no-name, broke Democrat. What's that mean? As Abbott tries to get years 13, 14, 15, and 16 in office, his 4th term as governor. It's getting out of control. Here's something I never thought I'd say. Get this. UT blows away Texas A&M for stopping liberal professors from tenure. Let me say that again. UT has blown away Texas A&M in terms of stopping liberal professors from securing tenure and moving them off campus. Holy smokes. There's something we talked about in prior episodes. You can hear all about what A&M has done. UT, the contrast is so stark. We've got to, if we have time, we need to get to the Carranza Borrego race and what that means. And also, did you catch the U.S. Supreme Court that made declarations about marijuana use in the U.S.? Holy smokes. More people report daily use or almost daily use of marijuana than they do alcohol consumption. Look about a trend that has changed. and the U.S. Supreme Court speaks to it. All right, there's a lot more. We're going to do everything we can to get through. We only have 54 minutes on this radio show. There will be more content, as there always is, on the podcast. Make sure you're signed up for our weekly newsletter, politicswiththebigdogs.com. And additionally, please, please, please sign the petition. Sign the petition to help ban taxpayer-funded lobbying. This is one of the great vices of political corruption going on in Texas. If you sign it, put your name and address on it, we'll automatically send it to your state representative and your state senator saying, pass the ban against taxpayer-funded lobbying. All right, folks, let's lead with the worst. Private Isabella Gonzales, a 19-year-old from Carrollton, Texas, which is the Dallas-Fort Worth area, for those of you in other parts of the state or not familiar. She was killed just a few days ago from an Iranian ballistic missile. And the Iranians, they were bragging that they were specifically targeting the barracks of sleeping soldiers in Jordan and other places. 4 other people were injured. We had 3 soldiers lost, but we lost a Texan. We lost a woman, a young lady, Isabella Gonzales, private first class, who had the courage to enlist, who had the strength and the drive to be a young lady and say, I'm going to go serve our nation. I'm prepared to be deployed. I'm prepared to be deployed to the Middle East. I'm prepared to fight, and I'm prepared to die if I must. And she did. This young lady lost her life in the service of our nation. There is a debt of gratitude, but the debt is so high we can't pay it. We as a culture and a society and as a family and as a movement can never pay adequately for the price of her life and her family's loss. Please send your prayers. Please take a moment, have a breath, say a prayer, send strength to she and her family. It's a solemn time when we were fighting one of the biggest terrorist regimes known to the U.S. in the last 50 years, the government of Iran. And this is what they're willing and eager to do. They have chanted death to America for decades. They've killed hundreds and hundreds of soldiers, primarily through Hamas and other terrorist states and entities that they fund and teach. And in this instance, they just straight up sent missiles, ballistic missiles, from Iran into Jordan, targeting our soldiers on their base. God bless her. God bless Isabella and all the soldiers and the people with the courage to have served. Thank you for what you've done. All right, folks, it's hard to transition from something like that. There's no way around it, but Isabella and her family deserved our time, our attention, even if it's very difficult to ponder. We got to move to the Secretary of State. So we've talked about the Secretary of State's office many times in the show. And again, if you're just tuning in for the first time, all these podcasts are listed. They're publicly available. And there's more content than the 54 minutes it runs on the network's radio. So here's what is important. It's an appointed position, but it works hand in glove with the Attorney General's office. With the governor's office. There's no way around it. I told you that I've worked for both the governor of Texas, then Governor Rick Perry many years ago, and also Secretary of State under Rick Perry while I was in law school. So it was early 2000s. They have a door between the offices. You can free flow back and forth. And what's important is the Texas Secretary of State is currently litigating against the Republican Party of Texas to keep the party from closing the primary. So what's that mean? It means that you have to pre-register as a Republican and you can't vote in a Democratic primary and then come and claim to be a Republican voting in a Republican primary. It just basically makes sure that we don't have Democrats electing Republicans, right, in our primaries. There's no way around it. Sidebar, Cornyn came out publicly opposed to this recently. Now, it was after he was defeated. He's really showing his stripes, and predicated on that, he put an op-ed in the Houston Chronicle, and part of his argument was predicated on, hey, all the data shows that Democrats, they don't want to leave their primary. They want to vote in their primary, not ours. Well, guess what? Democrats don't have a closed primary. And there's a lot of belief, and I believe it's founded belief that, for example, then Speaker Dade Phelan 2 cycles ago was elected in the runoff after Trump endorsed against him and beating Dave Covey by just, as I recall, like 300 votes or something. And this was after the then Speaker Phelan and his team drove what appeared to be 800 to 1,000 Democrats into the runoff. There's just no way around it. Now Dave Covey is vice chair of the Republican Party of Texas. Congratulations again. He and Dorinda Randall being elected recently, and in a wave election, they really just cleaned house on it. Well, they are now have taken over party leadership, which has been in litigation with the Secretary of State's office for the last few years. The Secretary of State has gone out and used tax monies to hire private counsel to keep the party from closing the primaries, from making it so that only Republicans vote in it, right? Attorney General usually would have defended this case, but Attorney General Paxton said, no, I think the party's right. They get to close it. I'm not going to do it. So the governor's SOS, Jane Nelson, who just resigned and I think left office about a week ago, maybe 10 days ago, she went and used taxpayer money to hire their own outside law firm. So now we have Robert Howden. Robert Howden has been affiliated with both Governor Perry and Governor Abbott for some time. He was a legislative affairs guy. I've known him personally for several decades, many decades. Heck of a nice guy, not a traditional movement activist, as I would define it. I think he's certainly a Republican, certainly always voted in probably in a Republican primary. He's a good fella, but he is not the movement conservative that some of the other people, the names that went around Austin were. So we'll see. I suspect that Robert Howden is going to pull down that litigation, but he's a newly appointed Secretary of State. What it means is we have some action, and that's very important. We have action on the topic. And remember, Nate Schatzline, who we talked about in one of these more recent episodes, he's a very conservative, movement conservative state rep who was going to run for state Senate. I think he was up for SOS, but there's a restriction in the Constitution that if you got to wait a cycle. So now he's senior advisor to the governor. Hopefully, Nate being in the governor's office can ensure that the next Secretary of State and his team pull down this litigation and we get to close the primary. But that's big news. There's been movement. We'll keep you apprised and abreast. I do think it's going to take all of us continuing to lobby, to lead with our voices, to lead with our votes, to ensure we close the primary. I mean, it's kind of just like banning taxpayer-funded lobbying. These are no-brainer policy issues that conservatives would do, but the establishment just won't get it done. Abbott and his team haven't gotten it done. We are going to have to force our will through our votes and our voices to ensure that good, sound policy outcomes, conservative, free market policy outcomes are advanced in Texas. So stay loud and stay proud. All right, guys, we're going to have to move on to another topic, but we'll come back and visit SOS as it's needed.
Thanks, Anthony. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter at politicswiththebigdogs.com. We'll keep you informed on new episodes, new guests, and new opportunities for your voice to be heard across Texas. Learn more and sign up today at politicswiththebigdogs.com.
All right, folks. So we got these two Texas mayors, and this is just insane. Both did very different things, both in deep hot water. One indicted on felony. So it's just wild. Mayor Burton in a town, Arcola, Arcola, Texas, which is in Fort Bend County. So it's just outside southwest of Houston. The mayor is indicted by a grand jury, and these are felony indictments for allowing and or aiding voting fraud by non-eligible voters. So the guy was just elected mayor. I think he won by like 28 votes. It was a real small little election. There's 4 or 5 or 6 identified votes that are ineligible, and it looks like he facilitated, if not instigated, that voting. So I don't know that it's going to change an outcome. Of course, if you're convicted of a felony, you probably have to vacate the seat. But hallelujah, folks are paying attention. They're finally calling others out. I don't know if the guy's a D or an R. It's probably nonpartisan. But Mayor Burton has been indicted on felony for allowing, if not aiding, illegal votes by people who are ineligible, not registered, not citizens or otherwise. So again, Arcola, Texas, and Mayor Burton, if you want to go and do a little research on your own, have a look. We'll try to keep you apprised as the grand jury moves forward and see if there's a deal, if the guy vacates office, or, hey, we're innocent until proven guilty in this nation. So maybe he'll be uh, found not guilty or just plead out. And the other one is the mayor of Midland. This is crazy. And I also want to look. Let's go back to Arcola for a second. The folks at Texas Minute brought this to my attention. They're an online news organization, wonderful thought leaders, and they catch a lot of things that many of us miss. And I would have missed Arcola. There's no way around it. And then Current Revolt, who's also an online news and breaks some really good stories, flagged the mayor of Midland. I saw this a few places, but I think they had the most comprehensive coverage. So what's going on with the mayor of Midland? So this guy is having basically an online fight on Facebook and other social media with a rabble rouser activist type in Midland. Okay, it happens, right? Like, I don't engage in any of these, but I've seen them back and forth, and I'm just not on social media very much. Though politics where the big dogs is, so make sure you're following us, right, on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, everything you'd expect. But so what's the mayor of Midland then do? He says, well, hey, this guy some years ago had a warrant and got convicted, I do believe. This guy who's been badgering me online, I've been fighting with online. Here it is. See for yourself. And he posts a document that has all sorts of privileged and protected information. You're not, for example, supposed to put somebody's social security number and address all online. Actually, there was a lot of questionable, I think fair questioning of where the mayor of Midland got that information, unredacted copies of criminal documents, right? Was it because he uses mayoral position to secure them? And I'll just tell you, as a lawyer, remember, I'm a lawyer and a trial lawyer, I litigate cases. When things get filed, which lots of documents get filed and medical records and things with people's social security numbers, it has to be redacted, all but the last 4 or the last 3 of somebody's Texas driver's license. So I just think the mayor was probably frustrated and angry. And you've seen it, I've seen it. These people go back and forth and online, calling names like everybody's big tough person when they're at their keyboard, but face to face they tend to be very different. So the mayor posts this unredacted copy, which violates Texas law, like materially violates the law. And there's also a separate question of how did you get it, Mr. Mayor? Because if you got it in your official capacity as a mayor and then posted it on your private Facebook and other social media just to harm somebody, now there's potentially another violation. So this is a big deal. It's a big deal in Midland. It's a big enough deal that the chair of the school board, who's an elected official, Midland Independent School District, says, hey, Mayor, you can't do that. In fact, you got to resign your seat. You knew or should have known better that you can't post this stuff. And there's a whole question about how you accessed this unredacted. This is a violation big enough that you ought to vacate the office. Holy smokes. Folks, I need to clarify something because I just said the mayor of Midland. I think I said it a couple times. And in fact, it was the county judge of Midland. I apologize to the mayor of Midland. I just simply misspoke. I think even in the lead, I might have said 2 mayors. In fact, it's a county judge and a mayor. So I'm gonna spend some time on it now, just since I made that mistake. So the Midland County judge, his name is Terry Johnson. And Mr. Johnson had been in an online back and forth with a Midland County resident, Cristino Rodriguez. He's known online as Nino America. And Nino America, among the other back and forth with the county judge, again, Midland County judge, not the mayor, Terry Johnson is the judge's name. Nino America went and published 2 court records, federal court records. Now, these are almost always public, right? And I'll just tell you as a lawyer, most of the records are public in these federal filings, unless they have been specifically sealed. So one's still pending. It's a pending action in litigation. And the other one resulted in a $150,000 settlement with a former county employee who alleged retaliation under County Judge Johnson. Again, not Mayor, County Judge Johnson. So Midland County employee says, hey, I'm suing the Midland County and the Midland County judge because I was retaliated against by Terry Johnson. And it ended up that there was a settlement for $150,000. Now, a settlement doesn't mean that the county judge did something wrong, but where there's smoke, there's fire. It's usually a pretty good indication that there's some type of actions or conduct that the lawyers in the county feel are exposed, right? So again, not the mayor of Midland, county judge. So what's a county judge do? Like less than 24 hours later, County Judge Johnson somehow secures an old warrant with Nino America's name, social security number, date of birth, and driver's license number, and he posted on this personal web page, on his Facebook, page. So County Judge comes up with this old warrant summary, that all these specific information, and puts it on this Facebook page, and then types convicted felon trying to be a player, close quote. So this is Terry Johnson. And again, I gave a shout out early on to Current Revolt. They did the most comprehensive report on this that I've seen. Well, it turns out that the claim and the charges were more than 10 years old about Nino America, and looks like they were dismissed. And maybe he was a convicted felon, maybe he wasn't. He's telling the news reporters that these were dismissed. It's not true. And a county judge knows or should know and made false statements. But the very curious thing is, where did County Judge Terry Johnson get an unredacted warrant more than 10 years old in less than 24 hours? That's a fair question. Did he use his mayoral capacity to somehow secure it? That is also a fair question. If he did, then he's got probably a big violation on his hand of abuse of office, abuse of elected authority and power, because what he was really doing is having a personal dispute with somebody that he was pissed about. Let's just call it what it is, right? But it's the power of these elected officials. They just think that they can do anything they want, and they can't be criticized. And you can't have any posting or words against what they're doing or their policy beliefs. So this guy, this Terry Johnson, the Midland County judge, says this guy's trying to be a player. He's a convicted felon. See. Well, of course, he deletes it very shortly thereafter, and other people, to include the ISD chair, says, you got to resign. You just can't do this. You got to resign from your office. It's an egregious abuse of power and a felony. If you don't like America law, then you should move. I mean, pretty powerful statements by a number of people. Wow. I tend to agree. This is the law. It is a felony, as I read the law, to post all of this private information, and particularly if you know or should know that it's false. It says the guy's a felon when the fellow who's in the dispute, and he's just a regular citizen, says, no, it was all dismissed. It's not true. So Texas Penal Code 39.03, official oppression, appears to be, as Current Revolt reports, written for this exact scenario. A public servant who misuses the power of information of his office against someone is a Class A misdemeanor. So fraudulent use or possession of identifying information, Texas Penal Code 32.51, explicitly defines identifying information as social security number, date of birth, driver's license number. Obtaining or possessing or transferring it without the consent of the individual with the intent to harm is a felony. A felony. It sure looks to me like the county judge, Midland County Judge Terry Johnson, committed a felony. Now, we can all argue about his intent, but I think it's going to be a tough one for him. All right, guys. So there we have a mayor in Arcola, Texas, out in Fort Bend County, felony indictment by a grand jury for voter fraud. This is Mayor Burton. And we have a county judge of Midland County who has not been indicted or charged with a crime, but I suspect some type of criminal investigation is coming if it hasn't already begun. And independent of that, other elected officials have called in his resignation. Wow. All right, folks, we got to move on to the next topic. Let's talk about Abbott a little bit. Governor Abbott is running for, he's completed, or about to complete 3 terms. So 12 years as governor, wants to be the longest serving Texas governor, really the totality of the Republican majority. Clear majority in the House, clear majority in the Senate. The guy's been governor. He has not, from my observation, led on policy the way that I think many of us would have liked. Now, the last few years has been a lot better. The last 3 years has been materially better, in large part, I think, because Don Huffines and others challenged him in the primary, and he kind of saw the light. But setting that aside, he has been the most impressive fundraiser I've ever seen. I don't think Texas has ever seen a more successful political fundraiser for state office in Texas than Greg Abbott. I am very confident he has raised in excess of $500 million in his time in state office. I bet it's closer to $700 million. He's been sitting on right around $100 million, and he tends to spend it, right? So he started spending. He's spent several $1,000,000, and what made news recently is that he has pre-purchased TV for early August. So here in the next few weeks, he'll be running commercials. He'll be running commercials against, or probably not even naming his opponent because nobody knows who she is, or I think that she even has an opponent. So it'll probably be all about Abbott, right? Of course, and I know, or most of us know at least, that Gina Hinojosa, who's a liberal Democrat state representative from Austin area, is running against him. She's the nominee. She has no name ID. She has no money. And she's such an afterthought that it was widely reported that the Democrat State Party recently, a few weeks ago in Corpus Christi, a list of statewide candidates and material candidates for elected office was put together, and her name was like accidentally left off. I mean, I think she is that unseen, unheard, and otherwise. So this is a short segment, but it is worth noting that Abbott, who is a voracious fundraiser, and really a judge at heart. Let's just be clear about it. That's how he is. He's a judge at heart. I think he is just of late starting to develop material policy to opinions and positions, and in large part because of the primary that we spoke of a moment ago, and then also he's positioning himself to run for president after Trump. I think that'll be a very difficult race for him, but let's see what happens. So, Abbott said, we being Republicans, are going to win Harris County. He's going to spend enough money to ensure that we win. So I'm looking forward to him spending $50 million or more to ensure Republicans win Harris County. I believe it's a really, really tough task, but he didn't say we're going to try to win. He didn't say we're going to spend $50 million, see what we can do. He said, we will win. So he threw down the gauntlet. Big, bold statement. I'm looking forward to him doing it, because if we flip Harris County, then we Republicans, we control it top to bottom. Like if we ever won Harris County again in a material way, the D's would just be wrecked. There's no way around it. So keep your eyes peeled for Abbott television commercials. That's what was reported. And let me know what you see. Fire them in. And I'm speculating in the here and now he won't speak much about Gina Hinojosa and listen until she gets some name ID, which would be much closer to the election date. But if I'm wrong, please advise. Let us know. If you're seeing these, which they ought to start in about 2.5 weeks, and he's whacking Hinojosa, definitely screen grab it, capture it, call, email, let us know here at politicsforthebigdogs.com. All right, guys, let's move on. Here's where we want to transition to. There is a state rep seat, and it's the most conspicuous example of what I'm going to outline for you. And another example is John Cornyn abandoning the Republican nominee for U.S. Senate, right? So John Cornyn and his allies, all these kind of status quo business people who spent over $150 million just attacking and tearing down Ken Paxton, have now abandoned Paxton. Cornyn I'm not going to show up. Oh, I might vote for him. But he's not endorsed him in a material fashion. He's not campaigning for him. He isn't doing any of the things. He's not telling his donors, hey, we can't let Tallarico win. Make sure you're funding Ken Paxton at least as much as you spent against him, right, in the last few months, advancing just the ugliest sentiment imaginable. Much of it false, just straight up. Instead, Cornyn is saying to anyone who will listen, well, Donald Trump got what he wanted. He got that other guy, and good luck to him. Like he being John Cornyn, and the cabal of donors, these moderate donors, and the folks at Texans for Lawsuit Reform, who are the same donors, what they really want is Tallarico to win. So they can say, see, I told you so. And then also, they don't want anybody who will contest their power. So not only do they want to say, see, I told you so, they want to make sure that Ken Paxton's not the U.S. U.S. Senator, because they don't want anyone contesting their power. And we're going to break down some of these state rep races where the same thing is happening, and it's probably going to have a worse outcome, because unlike the state of Texas, which is a clearly Republican majority state, some of these state house races are not. So Ken Paxton is going to win whether John Cornyn and this cabal of liberal donors help him or not. That's just how it is. Tallarico is a crazy wacko with, 6 genders, not 2, and God's binary, and meat is bad and an existential threat to our lives and the environment. The guy's just crazy, and he wants men to compete in women's sports, and specifically boys to compete in girls' sports. Boy wakes up tomorrow and decides his name is Judy, then he gets to go and compete against our daughters on the soccer team. And Tallarico wants to not only permit that, but pass a law saying you can't stop it. You have to affirmatively let that happen. So on the statewide level, Tallarico is going to get crushed. But these districts, these state rep districts, that's a whole different story. And now let's dive into some of them, because the Republican establishment has just surrendered after the primary and abandoning that seat. And they're not hoping the Democrat will win. They know the Democrat will win, and specifically Texans for Lawsuit Reform and John Cornyn and the Bush cabal.
More with Anthony Holm coming up in just a minute. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter at politicswiththebigdogs.com. While you're there, make sure you listen to our previous episodes of Politics with the Big Dogs. Politics with the Big Dogs is brought to you by the First Amendment Alliance Education Fund. Got a question for Anthony Holm? Email anthony@politicswiththebigdogs.com. Now, more with Anthony Holm on Politics with the Big Dogs.
I'm going to describe one of the many races for Texas state representative where establishment donors have positioned for likely success, if not ensured, that the Democrat will win and not the Republican. And the best example is House District 118, so 118. So it wraps around from San Antonio. It's the south side of San Antonio, and it wraps around up to the north side, like almost a converse, but it's based in South San Antonio, and it's a marginally Republican district. So Republican Lujan had held it for some period of time, and he decided to run for U.S. House to go to Congress. He ended up losing, but it opened up the seat. And Lujan was going to, had endorsed or was actually supporting. There were 3 people that ran for that open seat in the Republican primary. One was Desi Martinez. Desi Martinez put in like $100,000 or $200,000 of his own money. He's got a good name for it. He's a moderate Republican, but he's a trial lawyer. And the Republican establishment of Abbott and the John Cornyn donors and the folks at Texans for Lawsuit Reform, so we can't have a Republican trial lawyer in the House. We just can't. So we're going to go and get behind this guy, Jorge Borrego, who is much more conservative. And he is, I believe, on policies. Now, I've never spoken to Martinez or Borrego, but reading their profiles, I would extract that. There was a third person, Joe Shellhart, who didn't have much hope. But what was striking is the Texans for Lawsuit Reform PAC donated right at $400,000 of Borrego's $460,000. 88% of all of his money came from one PAC, and then some of their donors independently gave money to Borrego. So it's like right at 90%. And the same thing happened with Carl Tepper up in Lubbock and Jeff Leach, where, you know, these guys, 90% of their contributions are coming from one lobby group who are like, you're bought and paid for. You're going to do what we want, even if you think it's bad policy. There's just no way around it. But independent of the policy, it's the politics, because that seat, I believe very strongly, and most people who are sophisticated and look at these races believe that Desi Martinez could have held that seat in November as a Republican. But instead, he's a trial lawyer, even though he's a Republican and conservative, maybe not as conservative as Borrego. As I said, I've not met either one or talked to either one, but I looked at it and I followed this race closely for a few different reasons. One, because it's a marginal seat. It's one that we were trying to hold, right? Otherwise, it's going to go to a Democrat, a liberal Democrat. So 3 people in the race. TLR totally funds a guy who cannot hold it in November. There's no way around that. Just to keep a trial lawyer out who could hold it for Republicans in November. And it goes to a runoff, and it's Martinez and Borrego. And Borrego wins in the runoff. Okay, fine. It is what it is. But TLR, the largest lobby group in Texas and the largest PAC, gave over $400,000 to Borrego in the primary to keep Martinez out. Now let's fast forward, because TLR has thus far totally abandoned Jorge Borrego and surrendered that seat to a woman named Kristian Carranza, Caranza. So what was a Republican-held House seat is going to for sure be flipped to a liberal Democrat. And why? Because TLR spent over $400,000 in a primary to ensure a trial lawyer Republican would not win and be the nominee, and they completely abandoned their guy. They said, we know he's going to lose. We did our job, which was to defeat the Republican trial lawyer, knowing the seat's going to go to a Democrat. And why do I say that they have abandoned him? Well, here's why. We just got campaign finance reports for the first 6 months of all of these candidates. And guess what? Kristian Carranza raised more money than any other House Democrat candidate. She has $220,000 cash on hand, and Borrego has how much? $13,000. That's a 17-to-1 cash advantage. And TLR, who, you know, gave millions of dollars to Democrats over the year and millions of dollars to Republicans, let's be clean about it, but funded lots of Democrats. They haven't given anything. They're sitting on $35 million in their PAC, and they're not trying to elect Borrego, the Republican. Now we're down to the Republican and the Democrat, much like Ken Paxton and Tallarico. It doesn't matter if you like these people or not. You're with them or you're against them. If you're against Paxton, like Cornyn seems to be, and all of his donors, and TLR seems to be, then you are for Tallarico. And if you're against Borrego and or abandoning the guy, $13,000, that's what he has. He raised nothing the first 6 months. Or I'm sorry, after the primary runoff, after you contributed $400,000 just to beat a Republican trial lawyer, and now you said, "Oh yeah, we know the Democrats going to win. We're going home. We're keeping our money," and you're sitting on $35 million in their PAC. That's wrong. I mean, that's against the party. That's against policy. That's against everything that you and I believe in. And there's a lot of this going on. Right? It's most conspicuous with the Cornyn Paxton situation, where these guys spend $150 million trying to defeat Paxton and then abandon him in the general. But the difference is Paxton's going to win because it's a statewide election and Tallarico's crazy. But the same group of donors and the same group of thought leaders did this. They spent the equivalent, right? $400,000, 90% of all the money for Borrego against a Republican in the primary, and then totally abandoned him in the general, surrendering that seat to a Democrat. So Democrats are going to have a net pickup in the Texas House of Representatives. There's no way around it. 88 Republicans currently, and I think for sure Democrats are going to get 4 seats, but they might get 6 or 7. And TLR, who funds Democrats too, said, yeah, this one, we're just surrendering it. It's going from a Republican named Lujan to a Democrat named Carranza. But we did our job. We did what we wanted. We kept the Republican trial lawyer out. The same thing they're trying to do to Paxton. just fundamentally wrong. So to these go along, get along Republicans who would just as soon elect Democrats, the Cornyns, the Bushes, the Texans for Lawsuit Reforms of the world of Texas, either get on the program and fund these Republicans or step out of the field entirely, because you're just ensuring liberal Democrats get elected. Your conduct, your harm you're doing to the movement, and that's why people are rising up against you, against your power. These listeners, legions of Republicans. Their TLR tried to defeat the most conservative Republicans because they wouldn't bend the knee to their really bad policy. And it is time that we all stand together for good policy outcomes and stand together for Republicans. It's binary. It's us versus them now. Ours versus D's on the November ballot. And Tallarico has a real problem with African Americans. And even if he somehow pulls that together after his primary, he has a real problem with his voting and his policy history. He's going to be defeated, period. But these down ballot races, we, Republicans, have real exposure. And the folks at TLR and the folks in the Cornyn machine and the folks in the Bush machine brought that exposure upon us and are now smugly sitting back, laughing and hoping Republicans lose. Send a message to the Texas Speaker. Send a message to the Lieutenant Governor. No more. Send a message to Abbott, who is taking millions of dollars from these same people and won't criticize them, won't tell them to stop. Send a message and say no more. You either put those profile of people to heel or we'll do it to you. That's what we need to tell them. You can't have this. You and I, we're fighting every day to close primaries. We're fighting to ensure voter ID goes national. We're fighting to ban taxpayer-funded lobbying. And these guys are out swilling drinks and hobnobbing with these mega donors who are fighting to defeat our Republican candidates in November. And they're doing it either directly by opposing them and funding Democrats like TLR PAC is, or indirectly by abandoning the Republicans like Cornyn is, like the Bushes have, and like TLR has in this Borrego, Carranza, and Paxton, Tallarico campaign. We can't stand for this anymore because at some point Democrats are going to pick up more and more seats and likely a majority of seats in one of these bodies. And the window of opportunity for you and I to affect the change that we believe in, it won't be closed, but it'll be a heck of a lot harder. And the biggest impediments are Abbott and the TLR Democrat donor machine. No way around it. They're funding the moderate R's, the Jeff Leaches of the world, who've gotten like $2.5-ish million from TLR and advancing liberal causes. They're funding the Carl Teppers of the world in Lubbock, who's, ran as a conservative and then gets in there and certainly is not. They're funding these Democrats who are out there trying to strip us of our rights. That's who these people are. And it is a war of ideas and values. And Texans deserve better, and we've got to stand up to power. So time to move on, but this is one of many, many seats on similar situations where it's just pure abandonment and surrendering it to the Democrats. They're trying to get Mark LaHood defeated. They're not going to give him a penny. They've been real clear about it. Mark DeRazio, who was chair of the Bexar County Party and led the effort against Strauss way back when he was chair of the party. They censured him. Moderate Speaker Strauss. Oh no, they're going to abandon them. They're abandoning Hopper. They're abandoning the most conservative members. It's just insanity. And yet they're being welcomed to the governor's mansion without issue because they're still cutting $500,000, $1 million checks to Abbott. And they're doing the same to Dan Patrick and to the speaker. Less so to the speaker, but the same to the big three. Let your voice be heard. No more. All right, guys, we got to move on.
Love what you're hearing? Find all of our shows at politicswiththebigdogs.com. Subscribe to our newsletter and send in your questions. politicswiththebigdogs.com.
President Trump does a national address 10-ish days ago or so. And in it, he spoke very specifically and at least Google is if you didn't hear the speech. He spoke very specifically about foreign governments interfering in our elections, just straight up trying to affecting the outcome of elections. So specifically, he said Iran, China, and others have been attacking our elections, and the 2020 election was materially impacted by China. Well, I don't think there's any disputing that Chinese government, number one, has infiltrated and hacked and stolen a lot of information, corporate sabotage, political sabotage, and otherwise for decades. It's kind of a hallmark, and every American generally understands that. It's just been so prevalent and reported. They've been caught so many times. They also clearly downloaded a big chunk, if not all, of the voter file and cross-referenced it with individuals. I believe that is without dispute. And what I'm really struggling with is that China has a law, and this was the part I believe, but I hadn't seen the law. And it came out after the speech, after the president's speech recently. It says, the law requires Chinese companies to, quote, support, assist, and cooperate with national intelligence efforts. Okay. So you might go, all right, well, fine. That's patriotism from their perspective, right? But a Chinese company is required to, quote, support, assist, and cooperate with national intelligence efforts. So what does that mean, right? It can mean a lot of things. I don't know specifically what it means, but here's what it sure could mean. It could mean that TikTok, right, an app that's on, I don't know, 100 million or so Americans' phone, is picking up what we say and watching us and feeding it to the Chinese government. Could easily mean that. Those could be, quote unquote, national intelligence efforts. It is a mandate under Chinese law that their companies, which are now really prevalent on our roads, in our pockets, and the key components in our electronic software all across America, right? Their cars. If they're able to project and record the image of as we're driving, well, then they could just as easily send that data back. And I'm sure that data goes back to the company, the Chinese company. The question is it being shared with the Chinese government, or does it matter, right? Does not, of course it matters, but what I'm saying is perhaps not all cars, but what if a senator's driving a car? What if somebody associated with national security is driving a car? Are they listening to those conversations? I bet they are. I would assume so. And I want to remind us, as we talk about this, I want to remind us of some really obvious things that nobody's disputing. We had these great big old balloons that were flying across the nation that were videoing and photographing sensitive U.S. land and dams and infrastructure. That was very clearly a foreign actor, and specifically China. These spy balloons, remember those? And very clearly, all these Chinese businesses, quote unquote, made land purchases that just happened to be right next to key U.S. military bases, right? That's all been in the news and got uncovered. But when these things come out, drip, drip here and drip, drip there, you don't think about it as all the puzzle pieces coming together at once. Or these so-called Confucius centers at major universities, remember? Or frankly, the COVID stuff that was funded by the U.S. and done in conjunction with the U.S. And then they just burned the labs. So there's a regulation that TikTok cannot be put on any government phone. That's for a reason, because it has the opportunity to spy. There's a lot of data out there, unequivocal studies that even phones that are shut off are picking up location trackers and picking up words. You've experienced this, I'm sure. I've experienced it. I've gone and talked about something obscure, and then the next thing I know, a day later, I'm being fed ads for that obscure thing. I went and talked about fermented foods. Like there was some study I was reading. How does it impact your gut? And man, if 16 hours later I wasn't getting, hey, here's a coupon for this type of fermented food from my phone, right? And all the Alexa products and all these things that are absolutely listening and capturing our conduct and our activities. I'm troubled by that. Generically, I don't like it personally. I don't like Alexa in my home, but we're still getting tracked. I have an iPhone. It is what it is. Our cars are tracking us, capturing this data. But that is different than sending that data back to a hostile nation. And it is even worse if a powerful dictator, like the premier of China, has a law that says you shall share your business findings and information to support and assist and cooperate with the national intelligence efforts of the Chinese, communist China, right? Like vastly different. And if you'll just do a little bit of research, you'll see that the Chinese government has been funding many of these technology companies, taking a material position in them. And then these companies are producing servers and electronics and key components going into software, communications, phone system, computer tech around the world. Of course, that's information data is being captured. And of course, it's being shared with the Chinese Communist government. No way around it. It's one of the reasons that the U.S. government has barred so much Chinese tech in embassy build-outs and Department of Defense and areas. But there's zero question that they're out there stealing technology, and they're some of the most successful hackers in the world. So why would we ever think that our data, just generic data, day-to-day live, is not being shared with the Chinese government, number one? And then number two, is it really far-fetched that they're intervening and trying to impact a U.S. presidential? I mean, you're trying to do it. I'm trying to do it. This show, we're trying to do it, right? We're having policy impacts, and we're having electoral impacts to some extent driven by policy, and we want policy outcomes. Well, China wants policy outcomes. So if they have a law saying that you got to share all of your information as a Chinese company with us for our national security interests, and they want these policy outcomes, then of course they're going to affect the change that is in their interest. And of course, they're going to try to impact who becomes president of the United States. Do I think they wanted Donald Trump? Probably not. Would you rather have a geriatric in Biden reelected, or somebody who's asleep and docile and generally just surrendering to socialism anyway, if you're a communist state of China? Or would you want an unpredictable, tariff-driven guy named Donald Trump? I mean, that's pretty obvious. President Trump got panned for some of these statements across mainstream media, and that's why we're talking about it here, because there's a tremendous amount of foundation and just obvious fact in many of his assertions from that speech to the nation. I gave some of the commentary into the introduction, but I'm going to go quickly through it. It turns out that marijuana products are now reported by Americans to be consumed at a higher rate on a daily average than alcohol. It's just stunning to me. And the U.S. Supreme Court spoke to that in a ruling in the last couple of years, but someone raised it to my attention and made this statement to me. I thought, that can't be right. Is that true? And it sure as heck is. Neil Gorsuch said, quote, "More Americans now report using marijuana nearly every day than drinking alcohol." He went on to say, widespread and increasingly socially acceptable, in reference to marijuana and marijuana products. The U.S. Supreme Court made this statement, and it got repeated to me, and I went and tracked it down, and yes, the data suggests this. And the U.S. Supreme Court was ruling on it, not about marijuana use per se, but there was an effort to restrict gun ownership, right? Impede our right to bear arms, Second Amendment, because somebody said, yeah, I'm an active marijuana user. But there was no such or similar restriction if somebody said, yeah, I drink a beer every day or a cocktail when I come home at night. I'm an active consumer of alcohol. But as big government often does and liberal activists often do, they're trying to, by hook or crook, impede gun ownership and limit our right to bear arms. So they brought an action. They said, well, if you're admitted to using marijuana regularly, then they're going to have restrictions on your ability to own a firearm and or possess and buy and purchase and control weapons. Man, it was just struck down pretty hard, pretty aggressively. And as a result, I think the only finding here that we can reasonably take away is that marijuana and marijuana products nationally, perhaps not in Texas, but nationally, are about as socially acceptable as alcohol. And it sure appears consumed at a higher rate. Anecdotally, I'm hearing this left and right from people in the liquor industry and in grocery stores and elsewhere that are saying, you'd be surprised, Anthony, it's these soccer moms that are coming in and getting like THC infused non-alcoholic drinks. I don't think alcohol and THC, I'm not well versed on it. I'm sorry. I don't really drink alcohol. So I don't think one is blended, but it sure looks like they're buying THC infused. What do you call them? Like, non-alcoholic drinks, and then buying Prosecco or something similar and mixing the two together. And they're like, man, Anthony, you'd be surprised. I can just tell you, looking at these shopping carts, seeing what's selling, it is the 40 to 55-year-old educated, suburban, moneyed soccer mom, generally conservative, who has a bottle of each in her cart, and you can tell what's going on. So, look, I didn't know that. I didn't understand it was as prevalent and as consumed at such high rates as it is. But when Gorch and the U.S. Supreme Court are writing about it, making these statements, I surrender to it. So, as some in the Texas legislature tried to ban and outlaw all of them top to bottom, I think they're going to struggle when there's something that is consumed as frequently as beer in America or in Texas. I mean, presumably we can extract that data set to Texas as well. Then you're going to have an awful hard time outlawing it. All right, folks, remember to take a breath and say a prayer for that incredibly strong soldier who we lost, a Texan, Miss Gonzales, 19 years old, killed by a ballistic missile sent and aimed at the barracks she was occupying in Jordan. Remember America. Remember Texas. Remember the freedom that our armed forces have given to us. And that quote, I doubt I'll do it justice, but I'll try, that every so often the tree of liberty has to be watered with the blood of tyrants and also the free. We have to be willing to surrender ourselves to advance liberty for the next generation. God bless Miss Gonzales and her family. And God bless Texas.
Politics with the Big Dogs with Anthony Holm is supported in part by the First Amendment Alliance Education Fund. Hear other episodes online in our archive. Visit politicswiththebigdogs.com. If you have a question for Anthony Holm, email Anthony at politicswiththebigdogs.com. From deep in the heart of Texas, you've been listening to Politics with the Big Dogs.